Hi there, my name is Henry Tenby. I'm the creator of the JetFlix TV aviation streaming service. As a lifelong Canadian aviation fan, airports and visiting airports, that's been a very special thing in my life, going back pretty much to the late 1960s when I first started traveling as a kid with my family. I have loved flying throughout Canada. I've loved flying on Air Canada, CP Air, Pacific Western Airlines, and airports, aviation spotting, and all things to do with Canadian Airlines is something I'm really interested in. As such, I have been a collector of airport postcards pretty much for the last 40 years. And in this video, I'm going to take you on a coast-to-coast visit of Canadian airports from going back through the 1970s, 60s, and even back to the 50s. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this trip down memory lane as we visit some of our great airports in this country. I'm actually going to be using postcards, vintage postcards, airport postcards, for the tour points as we go back in time on this tour. We actually start at Ottawa Uplands Airport circa 1967 with an Air Canada Vickers Viscount parked on the main ramp by the entrance to the terminal. Now, this is an image which is near and dear to my heart because this is how I got bitten by the aviation bug. It would have been in the 60s that I was visiting family, my grandparents in Ottawa, and my parents took me from Vancouver on Air Canada flights coast to coast, and I very specifically remember flying on Viscounts, and to this day, I would say the Viscount is one of my favorite airliners, and flying on Air Canada Viscounts, that's something that's ingrained in my memory, going back to probably when I was 3 or 4 years old. And this is a ramp, this is an aircraft, and this is a scene that I would have experienced probably at age 3 or 4, circa 1968. So for that reason, I'm starting this video with this image. And here's a little bit of an earlier view of Ottawa Uplands Airport with a TCA Viscount. This particular image dates to 1963, so it'd be about 5 years before my first visit to the airfield, but it does give a larger expanse view of the terminal building at the time. Now we jump to my hometown airport, Vancouver International. This is the South Terminal as we know it today, and back in the 1960s, it was the main airport for Vancouver. This image would date to about 1966, 67. We can see the observation deck and the old control tower hub. This is the area where we do our live streams from. The south side. So you can see the ramp is pretty much unchanged. Today, instead of large commercial airliners, we have smaller aircraft that park at the South Terminal, Pacific Coastal, etc. But basically, looking north, that's the exact same ramp and taxiway that we have today. In the far background, north part of the ramp, we've got 3 CPA DC-8s, Air Canada DC-8, and then closest to us, parallel to the observation deck, we've got an Air Canada Vanguard and an Air Canada Viscount. So as you can see, the Viscount and Vanguard featured very prominently during the period when I was first becoming a plane spotter. And I should point out that the observation deck that paralleled the airport building that you can see, my grandmother used to take me to this observation deck to watch the airplanes in the late 1960s. Well, up until they opened the new airport terminal building in 68. There's another view of the old airport at Vancouver International showing the Welcome to Vancouver sign, and we can clearly see the open air observation deck. And I remember this observation deck. As I say, it was a very prominent feature of the facility, and it was very popular. We have a TCA North Star on the ramp, and you can see the old control tower hub in the background. The control tower hub is located pretty much, I would say, where the present-day parking lot is for the South Terminal, where we do our live streams from. So yeah, this is a great image of a TCA North Star operating a transcon service circa 1958. And here's another view of Vancouver International. We have a local boy, Canadian Pacific Airlines Bristol Britannia, on the ramp. This is the exact ramp that we view when we do our YVR live streams. And Canadian Pacific, I believe, took possession of their Britannias from Bristol in 58. and they remained in service through the mid-60s. This particular image would have a Britannia being serviced probably for a flight to Honolulu, and the image dates from about 58 or 1959. We're looking south in this image. I included this image just for giggles. It's an Air Canada Baby DC-9 superimposed over the PNE, the Pacific National Exhibition in Vancouver, with the Agrodome in the lower left-hand corner. Air Canada took delivery of their Baby 9s in, I believe, 65, 66, and I do remember them as well. So yeah, there you have it. Just kind of an interesting shot. We now head clear across the country over to Toronto. We've got a nice image of a TCA Super Connie posed on the ramp at Toronto Moulton Airport, as they called it back then. Also, this airport featured a wonderful open-air balcony, and you can see the punters on the roof there soaking up the atmosphere. We can date this image to roughly 1954, 1955. We know that because the Super Connie is in the all-bare metal scheme, and they were delivered from Lockheed in the natural all-metal scheme. They weren't upgraded with the long noses and the white crowns probably for a couple of years. So probably not till 57-ish did the Connies have the white tops. We now jump to about 1962, 1963 with this image of Toronto International, and you can see that the old terminal building has given way to the new Terminal 1 ring structure with the parking garage in the center. We've got TCA Vanguard aircraft parked at the open-air gates, as well as a Viscount, a BOAC 707, having arrived from London Airport. The noteworthy point of this image is the multi-structure car parkade at the center of Terminal 1. And this was a, hallowed ground for Canadian aviation fans right up until the time it was torn down. I think it was in the mid-90s. And it was a fabulous spot for soaking up the action at Toronto. As you can see, it was at least 5 or 6 stories above grade, so you had a fabulous view looking down onto the aircraft parked at the gates, and of course it had a view out to the runways as well. So many a Canadian aviation spotter cut their teeth on this particular roof back in the day. This is another view of the Toronto Terminal 1, circa 1962. We've got a couple of TCA Vanguards and a Viscount at the gate. I can see an American Airlines Electra as well. And you can see the underpass in the about the 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock position where the cars entered Terminal 1, passing underneath the ramp. And in the upper left-hand corner, we have the administration building visible as well. This view of Toronto Terminal 1, which was called the Arrow Key when it first opened in the early 60s, is seen from the airport's administration building. We can also see the sundial in the foreground, and this would have been the view probably taken from the 3rd or 4th floor of the administration building, looking towards the Terminal 1 and ramp area. We now jump clear across the country to Gander International Airport, which was touting itself as the crossroads of the world, which it was during the prop era, but the jets brought about the saying, no goose, no gander, because the jetliners were able to do transatlantic services without the necessary fueling stop at Gander or Goose Bay that the prop liners required. But this is a nice shot, shows the full terminal building expanse, and we have an Air Canada Vanguard and a couple of Eastern Provincial DC-3s as well, roosting on the far right-hand side of the frame. This is Kelly Lake International Airport at Halifax, showing a TCA North Star and a TCA Viscount circa 1960. And at the time, the airport was referred to as Kelly Lake because that is where it was geographically located, on the outskirts of Halifax. Today, of course, Halifax, the airport is Stanfield International Airport, named after the province's premier. And this was one of the far-flung reaches of Canada, of the Dominion, in the early 1960s. But as you can see, it was still very well served by TCA. Actually, there are 2 North Stars on the ramp and a TCA Viscount. This is an absolutely fabulous view at the municipal airport, St. John, New Brunswick. Would be about 1965, 1966. We can see the entrance to the terminal building just by the nose of the aircraft, and the Viscount looks absolutely superb. In the late 50s and into the 60s, the Viscount, the Air Canada Viscounts provided the small service route support for Air Canada out of the major hubs like Toronto, Vancouver, Winnipeg, etc. And while we're on the topic of local service in Canada, we jump to the West Coast and we have a Pacific Western Airlines Javelin jet prop Convair 640 seen on the ramp at the very small Port Hardy Airport in British Columbia, at Port Hardy, BC, which is on Vancouver Island. The 52-passenger Convair 640 of Pacific Western Airlines, these aircraft operated local services out of Vancouver to locations such as Powell River, Comox, Campbell River, Port Hardy, and to Edmonton. They went to points north as well. The Convairs, there was only about 3 or 4 Convairs that PWA operated, and they were retired in 1978. I actually checked my official records, and PWA operated a total of 6 Convair 640s. The first, well, most of them, all but one, entered service in 1967. And these aircraft were essentially the Dash 8 Q400s of the day. Of course, we cannot forget Winnipeg. Winnipeg was a very important center for TransCanada Airlines back in the day. They actually had a huge base there, maintenance base, as well as an admin base. And I think most of the admin for TCA in the 1940s and early 1950s was centered out of Winnipeg before the company really set up a big presence in Montreal early 1950s. So yeah, we have a TCA North Star in the bare metal scheme on the Winnipeg ramp. You can see the little Winnipeg Airport terminal building with the Winnipeg Airport sign on the left-hand side. This is a very famous waiting area. And of course, there's the TransCanada Airlines hangar and maintenance facility, which dates back to basically shortly after World War II, or it might have even date back into the World War II years as well. So a fabulous image taken at the wonderful Stevenson Field, Winnipeg, Manitoba, circa 1953, 1954. In the 1950s and 1960s, Montreal was actually the largest aviation hub, biggest airport, biggest traffic in the country, in Canada. And we have here a SAS DC-8, Series 30, parked on the ramp at the new Montreal Dorval Airport. The terminal building opened, I believe, circa 1960. And is pretty much looking the same today, although it, of course, has expanded in the years since. But if you visit Montreal, it'll definitely look very similar to what we're seeing in these images. The same applies for the outside, landside view of the airport. If you arrive in Montreal today and just walk outside to get some fresh air after your flight, look at the terminal building, it's going to look just like this. Although there is a new addition to the left of this image where the hotel and additional gate areas are situated, but the main area looks just like this, even though this image dates from the early 1960s. This would be an early 1970s view of Montreal Dorval Airport as it existed at the time. We can see an Eastern Airlines 727-100 in the lower left-hand frame, and in the mid-frame we can see the Aero Key with a CP Air 727 at the gate as well. They've superimposed an Air Canada DC-8 taking off above the Air Canada maintenance base, and the flags are superimposed as well. Today, the new terminal building exists where the off-ramp comes off on the far left of the image there. So yeah, this is an interesting, I would say 1973 era image of Dorval. This view shows the Dorval main ramp with the Aero Key on the very far left. You can just see a snip of it there. And we have a lineup of Air Canada DC-8s and a KLM DC-8. And over by the main terminal building, we have Oh, we have an Air Canada Viscount and Vanguard, and we have a TCA Viscount and Vanguard as well. So it would date this image to about 1965, thereabouts. Here we have a KLM DC-850 Combi, nosed into the Aero Key, being ground serviced by CP Air. We can see the ground CP Air ground service equipment, and the main deck cargo door is open, and the flight will be turned pretty quickly for the return sector back to Amsterdam. We also have a BOAC 707 nosed into the Aero Key as well. This is a gorgeous shot, nighttime shot, taken during the Montreal Dorval Airport heyday of, I would say, the late 1960s, probably 69. This is an interesting view. It shows the Montreal Dorval Airport under construction, or certainly nearing the end of its construction phase. As those with a keen eye will see the original Montreal Airport on the left-hand side of the frame, and there are aircraft being serviced at the old terminal building. So this would suggest this image dates from probably late 58, sometime in 1959. I believe the Montreal Dorval Airport, the new terminal structure that we're looking at, opened in around 1960, just in time for the DC-8s. This is a very good image of the original Montreal Dorval Airport. I believe the terminal structure that we're looking at was built during the war years. We have two Canadian Pacific Airlines DC-3s sitting on the ramp. Strangely enough, they're a bit far away from Vancouver, but there they are in all their glorious splendor. As I say, this airport that we're looking at right here, this terminal structure was torn down when the new facility opened, and when this building was torn down, essentially they built the modern jet base, the maintenance base, which exists today in this similar location. Here are some images taken inside the brand new facility. We have the modern 1960s look here, baggage claim area that I'm sure many of our viewers will recognize from their early 60s travels. And here's a very lovely dusk shot of an Air Canada DC-840 being serviced, tailed into the Aero Key with the main terminal building as the beautiful backdrop. We now jump to Toronto in the 1970s. Here we have Terminal 1, and as you can see, the building is expanded. They've added fingers coming off the center wheel there, with multiple fingers sprouting from the main trunks. And we have American Airlines at the gate. We have a Convair of Allegheny. We've got also United Airlines DC-8. So the airport has expanded in the 15 years since it was built. And here's a fabulous view of Air Canada 747 CFTOB being ground serviced at Terminal 1. And we can very clearly see the parking structure in the background with people up on the very top, the top roof area, which was, as I say, absolutely fabulous for plane spotting. I would think this image dates from about 1974, 1975. And here's another mid-1970s image showing Toronto with Terminal 1 in the foreground and the then newly constructed Terminal 2 expanse in the background. And you can see Air Canada fleet lined up there on the back ramp. We've got a 747, a couple of Stretch 8s, two baby DC-9s, and other aircraft at the gate. Yet another view of Toronto's Terminal 2, this time with Terminal 1, which they called the Aero Key in the background. We have an Air Canada 747 sitting on the ramp, open ramp, and the gates are actually quite filled. We've got how many? We've got two Air Canada Stretch 8s and a bunch of DC-9s. And as you can see in the background, there are two CP Air DC-8s pushed off to the weeds. We now head back to Vancouver, my hometown airport, with a very special memory for me. This shows the observation deck at the new Vancouver International Airport. This observation deck was accessed through a little turnstile, which you would deposit a nickel or a dime, and my grandmother would take me to this observation deck. It was an open-air observation deck, and it remained open, I would say, up until about 1973, and then the terrorist activities of the era resulted in it being closed. But I would go with my grandmother, watch the airplanes, and have a wonderful time. And I very, very clearly remember spending time on this open-air observation deck. My grandmother was from England. She used to make me cucumber sandwiches, which I loved. And being on this deck was a very, very special thing for me. And I just love this image. And center frame, of course, we have the control tower hub, the trademark YVR control tower. Sadly, it was torn down, I believe, in the early 1990s when the new control tower was constructed. It's a shame that they tore it down. My view was that they should have always kept that control tower and made it an observation viewing platform. That would have been a much wiser thing to do, in my humble opinion. I should point out that CPR always parked their DC-8s at these gates. And as a kid, I flew on CPR's DC-8s, both short and stretch, between Vancouver and Honolulu, as my uncle and his family, which is my father's brother, lived there and still lives there. And we would take holidays, particularly over the Christmas holidays, to visit them. And I have many memories of flying on CPR's Diesel 8s between these very gates and Honolulu back in the day. And here's another lovely YVR memory, especially for me. This was the famous grassy knoll, and it overlooked the PWA 737 gate. It looked to the south, and as you can see, there's a Air Canada DC-9 superimposed climbing out over the tower, but that is not actually a correct runway departure profile. But this particular location, the grassy knoll, was somewhere that I have very, very fond memories of as a kid. I used to go there and watch airplanes, and I'm talking like in grade 7, 8, 9. And I do clearly remember being there with my mom and asking her and thinking about what I should do when I grow up. What was I going to be? And my mind, my heart was stuck on aviation, but of course I wasn't sure what I was going to be 100% when I was in grade 6 or grade 7. So, but sitting on that grassy knoll, watching airplanes, I guess in the long term, it solidified that I would become an aviation historian, photographer, videographer, and overall general av geek. Here we have two more classic 1970s YVR memories. One shows the observation deck and tower hub with a CPR DC-8 at the gate. The CP-8s always parked at those gates. You could always go to the airport in the 70s or early 80s and see DC-8s nosed into those gates. And on the right-hand side, we have Air Canada DC-8s also at the gates as viewed through the windows at the terminal. And much of the terminal glass and air conditioning and flooring looks the same today as it was when constructed in '68. So for those of you that are walking through YVR, there are areas that still are unchanged to this very day and look just like this. Here's a fabulous view of YVR taken by Air Canada's photographer George Hunter. I'm guessing he was in a helicopter, and it would date from about 1975. You can see we have two Air Canada TriStars at the TriStar gates, and we've got in the background two 747s. And notice how they park the 747 on the far left-hand side for passenger deplaning and boarding just down the air stairs onto the open ramp. Yeah, that's how they did it. JAL would park their 747 at the end of the finger too for boarding onto the ramp and out there into the elements. That's how they did it. And we have a United Airlines 727, and there's also, as you can see, CPDC-8 nosed into its regular gate area. Now, earlier I mentioned that I would spend time on the grassy knoll, and you can see the grassy knoll on the very far right-hand side of the frame, lower corner. And it was then, at the time this picture was taken, labeled as an Air Canada gate. But by the late 70s, PW were parking their 737s there as well. So I remember that gate on the very, very, very far right corner as a PW gate, the famous grassy knoll. Here's a fairly obscure destination. This is Prince George, British Columbia. It's the crossroads of highways 97 and 16 in north central BC, and it's actually the most central city in British Columbia. Here we have a CPR 737-200 operating service out of Vancouver with a control tower on the left. I've never been to Prince George, and one day I hope to go. The airport has a very similar design structure to the airport at Whitehorse. I wonder if they were designed by the same architectural firm. Anyhow, this 737 in sepia colors would date the image to about 1980. This is Thunder Bay Airport with a superimposed Transair Boeing 737-200 in the upper right-hand corner. I can't quite make out the ident on the F-27 that's parked on the ramp. Obviously, this is a very small airport. I've never been there, but it is, of course, one of the famous airports that has been served by Trans-Canada Airlines and Air Canada going back, I believe, to the 1940s. Speaking of which, here we have an Air Canada DC-9 sitting on the ramp at Thunder Bay in the company of a Transair DC-3. This image would date to about 1974, 1973, thereabouts. Our journey now takes us to the prairies, and we are now at Regina Airport. We have a Norcan Air F-27 with passengers arriving on the open ramp with an Air Canada DC-9 in the background. Norcan Air was acquired by Saskatoon businessman Albert Ethier, I believe, in the early 1980s, and Norcan Air was ultimately sold to Time Air Canadian Regional in 1986, 1987. And Norcan Air is one of my favorite Canadian airlines. I really love their F-27s and had an opportunity to visit Albert Ethier a number of times when I was in the industry back in the 1990s. And Albert Ethier became a very good friend of mine. Albert's no longer with us, but he really was a Canadian aviation legend and a great guy. Here's another very nice view of Regina Airport. This time we have an Air Canada DC-850 and an Air Canada DC-9 on the ramp. Wow, this airport was busy back in, I would estimate, 1972, 1973 when this image was taken. We also have a Norcan Air / Transair Twin Otter on the ramp, and obviously this was some form of joint service between Norcan Air and Transair. And on the information sheet for this image, it says this bustling airport is situated in the center of the prairies. We have a Norcan Air Twin Otter service making connections with Air Canada for domestic and international travel. So they must have had some form of passenger sharing relationship back then, which is very interesting. And here we are at Winnipeg International Airport, circa 1981-82. We have a Northwest Territorial Lockheed Electra parked on the open ramp on the left-hand side. There is also what appears to be a 727-100 parked at the ramp. Can't quite, actually it's Air Canada. It's Air Canada 727. There's an Air Canada DC-9 with a CP Air 737-200 nosed into the gate on the far right-hand side as well. This is how Winnipeg Airport looked like up until about 15 or 18 years ago when they expanded the airport quite dramatically to the left with an additional terminal and gate area. And here's an early 1970s view of Winnipeg Airport with a Northwest Airlines 727 and a Transair YS-11 parked at the gate. I can't quite make out the ident of the what appears to be a blue DC-3 that's sitting out by the weeds. This is the Edmonton International Airport that's located in Leduc and Nisku, just south of Edmonton. The Edmonton International Airport is situated in open farm country, and as you can see, the runways have vast distances of space around them, and for aviation fans and av geeks and photographers, there really are not any terrific plane spotting locations. And this is what the Edmonton International Airport looks like today. I took this picture in July of 2024. If you're still watching this video, I hope it means you're enjoying it. So please do take a moment to hit that like button. That would be much appreciated. And I really look forward to seeing your comments. Please leave a comment. Look forward to reading your comments. They're really valuable. They help the channel out, and they make for a much more interesting experience when people engage with this content. This is an aerial view of Calgary International Airport looking towards the southwest. This terminal building the present-day terminal facility was constructed between 1972 and 1977 when it opened that year. In the far distance to the left, you can see the downtown core of Calgary. Calgary is the present-day headquarters of WestJet, and it's a great airport for plane spotting. There's a lot of good plane spotting opportunities, both from the terminal building and from the perimeter, but you will need a vehicle if you're going to scout this airport out. Well, our journey has come full circle back to Ottawa International Airport, just where we started at the beginning of the video. Here we have the main entrance to the old Ottawa terminal building. We have an Air Canada Vickers Viscount tail in the right-hand corner, with the control tower hub in the center. Notice that the entrance platform of the terminal building was also a miniature observation deck, and there were people standing on the roof there viewing the proceedings. Well, thank you for watching my video. I really hope you've enjoyed it. I look forward to your comments. And if you're not already a member, please do subscribe to this channel. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Henry Tenby, and I'd like to introduce my brand new book for classic airline fans. It's called Air Travel Time Machine, and it features over 600 fabulous color Kodachrome memories taken between 1942 and 1960. So this book is a culmination of 30 years of collecting vintage, old aircraft slides from the 1950s and 60s, and this has been my life passion for decades. And the type of pictures that I am very interested in are not the standard images of just sterile shots of airplanes. These are pictures that tell a story, that show people, that show the interiors of airplanes, and show what travel was like during the golden age of aviation. This book is 288 pages. It's a hardcover book printed on 106-pound GSM high-quality gloss paper. It is a beautiful presentation, and you are going to love the images, and it is filled with captions and memories and great images that'll take you back to the post-war era of air travel. I hope you enjoy purchasing my book and reading my book. What follows are a selection of sample images from inside the book, just to give you an idea of the atmosphere and memories that are included in this incredible book. So I really hope that you'll enjoy the contents. It is a unique book because it really is a time travel wormhole view back through the sands of time to what air travel was like during the golden age of aviation and airlines. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you'll consider purchasing my book. As a side note, this is a limited production book. We're only printing 300 copies for the UK and Europe, and another 300 copies for Canada, USA distribution. So if you'd like to order a book, be sure to do so as soon as possible so that you are guaranteed to get a copy in your life.